Okay, so now we're going to talk about evolution and go through the evidences compiled by Darwin and then evidence since Darwin. So Darwin, when he went on his voyage of the Beagle, he stopped by the Galapagos Islands and he noticed a number of finches which he collected that seemed to be very similar in appearance but had differences in their beak size or their beak characteristics, and that seemed to be because of the different food, the different seeds that were available on the island. In all, there are about 14 recognized species, and they had a diversity of foods by which they harvested. So his hypothesis was that their beak shapes were related to what food they ate, and he wrote, "One might really fancy that one species has been taken and modified for different ends." This was an observation he made that showed that, or that he felt that one species could then diverge into a number of different species. And modern research has since confirmed that Darwin's hypothesis of natural selection being the driving force for evolution as a very sound theory that works. There are three conditions for natural selection. First, you need to have variation. So I have some giraffes here, and you can see there are a whole bunch of different spots, lines, colors within the population of giraffes. And you need to be able to have reproductive success. So one trait, let's say orange giraffes are better blended to their environment or have better camouflage than other giraffes. Then the other giraffes will be killed by predators, and you'll have more orange giraffes in the population, as long as that trait is transmissible or able to be inherited from parent to offspring, and that happens through sexual reproduction. But in a small part, it can also happen in other processes like binary fission. So some examples of natural selection that were observed closely after Darwin's hypothesis of natural selection were these peppered moths which lived in England. And what happened was, during the Industrial Revolution, the use of coal caused a lot of pollution to be in the air, and that ash and soot covered the trees, so they changed from a lighter color to a darker color. Well, these peppered moths were mostly white in color, and a small percentage of the population were dark. And so a bird could easily see a dark moth over a light moth because of the camouflage against the light trees. But once the the trees were covered in soot, then you saw a much higher prevalence of the dark colored moths, because again, predators could pick off the white moths much easier. Body color is a single trait or single gene which makes it easy to be inherited from one to the other. The selection was the predators which would eat it, and then so it's transmissible because it can be inherited through the genes. And then there was variation in the population because there were dark and light moths. Okay, the dark moths increased to near 100% because of the change in color of the trees, and thus the change in the camouflage against predators. So this is called industrial melanism, where the surroundings turn darker. Melanism means with color, basically. And other moths in other industrialized areas showed a similar pattern, but over time, when pollution control reduced the amount of soot on the trees, these dark moths, which you can see in here, decreased over time, and then the light moths took over the population. So one of the big evidences for natural selection is artificial selection. We'll talk about a few different types, but artificial selection is basically change initiated by humans. For example, these pigeons, they all come from the wild pigeons, which humans would then breed and they would select certain individuals for certain traits until they could make an orange one or a green one or a brown one over many generations of time. And this is directional selection, meaning humans have an end in mind, some sort of trait that they are exaggerating or want to be expressed more. For example, orange color. The way they would get some orange birds is they would take all of the nestlings from a pair, and they would find the orangest ones, and then they would mate those, and they would take those nestlings, and they would find the orangest ones and mate those, and continually over time you would be able to get a very orange-looking pigeon. And that is similar to how evolution works. And most scientists agree that natural selection is able to produce the variation required for the biodiversity that we see. But there are some critics that, well, natural selection is too slow. We don't see these changes happening. If you compare a wolf now to a wolf 1,000 years ago, they seem to be the same in their appearance. But natural selection, but artificial selection does show that there is actually quite a bit of variation. For example, all wolves or all dogs are wolves that we have selected into these different traits. But if you were to find these dogs in the fossil record, you would say that they were different animals. But these are actually just the same species. We've just selected for different things. A similar thing happens with domestication. So we've domesticated dogs, we've partially domesticated cats and other things, livestock, cows, and other things. And some people did a kind of an experiment with foxes, where they artificially selected for domesticating these foxes. And these were some scientists in Russia. What they did is they took litters of puppies, and they took the most friendly ones, the ones that were least scared of humans, and they bred those over many generations. What they found was they also have some of the same characteristics that dogs have, like floppy ears and shorter hair, or kind of a friendlier looking face. And that may be either pleiotropy, where one gene has multiple effects, so the gene for domestication also affects ear size and tail posture, or they may be on the same chromosome and are linked. Okay, experimental selection then is another type of artificial selection where scientists have an end in mind. So, for example, Drosophila melanogaster are fruit flies, which a lot of genetic experiments have been done on. And you can select these for the number of bristles on their legs. In the population, the average was 9.5, and through selection, over 86 generations, they were able to make or artificially select for flies that had 40 bristles on each leg. Agricultural selection, this is one where we select for, for example, larger ears of corn. Wild corn does not have very many kernels, and over time there are some intermediates of corn. Over time we've come to select for this modern corn, which has tons of kernels, a lot more than the original. And that is simply just by selecting for traits that increase the number of kernels. Okay, so selection is one evidence, and then you have fossil evidence. When you look at the many fossils in the record, they point to changes or evolution from one species to the next. What fossils are? They're preserved remains of once living organisms, so usually bones because they are hard, but can be other things as well. The age of fossils can be estimated by looking at isotopes, and we've found fossils that are billions of years old. Rock fossils are created when three events occur. First, the organism has to be buried in sediment and dirt, or something of that nature. And then the calcium in the bone or other hard tissue has to mineralize, has to be replaced by other minerals. And then the surrounding sediment around them has to harden to form rock. And this is actually a very rare event, and so that's why we don't have tons of fossils. We still have a lot, but it's not very complete. Well, we found that in the fossil record we do find transitions, which are considered missing links in the fossil record. One of these missing links or intermediate forms that we have found is called Archaeopteryx, and that's this fossil here. And this appears to be a bird dinosaur. Now, birds today are considered to be remnants or ancestors of dinosaurs, and that's because of these fossils. So this fossil has a lot of characteristics that are similar to both birds and dinosaurs. For example, it has feathers, you can see that there, and it also has a tail, but modern birds do not have tails. They have feathers, but not tails. It has digits, so it has a bunch of claws here. Modern birds do not have digits. They just have one bone on the end. But you can also see it has wings, so this probably flew. It also has teeth. Modern birds do not have teeth. They have just beaks with no teeth on them. So that's a hodgepodge of dinosaur characteristics and bird characteristics, and considered a missing link in the evolution between dinosaurs and birds. There are also lots of other fossil records that do show kind of almost a complete stage-by-stage evolution from one species to another. Whale evolution is one of those. They found a four-legged aquatic animal or mammal that has ear bones like a whale, but did not live exclusively in the water. There are also fossil snakes with legs. Tiktaalik is a species that bridged the gap between fish and the first amphibian. We also have examples of oysters that start out with small curved shells and then evolve to large flat shells. Horses are another example where it is well documented in the fossil record. The first horses lived in wooded habitats and had small legs. And then over time you had evolutionary adaptations with the environment. As you increased the number of grasslands, the legs of the horses became longer so they could run faster. They had more room to run. The number of digits reduced, so they start out with having 4 digits, and now modern horses have 1 digit on each leg. And also there were changes in their teeth so that they could eat more grass rather than branches and leaves. Alright, anatomical evidence for evolution. Homologous structures. So you look at, and we've talked about this before, but there are a lot of structures in very different animals, like a bird, a human, and a dolphin, a human, and a bat. The structures are used for entirely different things. We use our hand for grabbing, a porpoise or a dolphin uses it for swimming, a bat uses it for flying, but the bones are the same. They have a radius and an ulna, they have carpal bones, they have metacarpals, all the same bones, but used for a different thing. So these are homologous structures because they are the same. If you look at them, they have the same general structure, but are used in different ways. Embryonic development also shows a common ancestry. If you look at embryos, so shortly after fertilization, when things start to develop, all mammals look pretty much the same. Humans look like tadpoles, and fish look like tadpoles. They all just look like this very small, similar thing with gill slits. And then over time they develop into different structures. So in humans, the pharyngeal pouches develop into glands and ducts, while in fish they develop into gill slits. Okay, also some of the things are imperfect. So after this I'm going to have to start a new one. For example, eyes in humans or invertebrates have a blind spot, where in mollusks they don't. It seems like if we were designed, then we would have... Alright, I'm going to have to start with this one next time. I'm running out of time.